Oh my gosh, like I am totally going off track. I have no idea if this is going to be successful or not. I think a career is really the set of challenges you decide to put in front of you.
Kiki Couchman is a Stanford grad who left her job in private equity to build a yogurt company with her best friend.
Every day I wake up and I'm so excited to get to work on Beny. People misplace success on raising capital versus actually creating a good business. We don't need 1.5 million. We need tens of thousands.
You have this very interesting approach about building publicly.
We have a product that expires. I have to sell it in a month. We need to have a virtual line out the door at any given moment.
When you succeed in public, but when you fail, you also fail in public. And how do
Totally.
you deal with those emotions?
It's a day-to-day battle. I knew we needed to build in public because of the product that we are putting out in the market. It's a consumer product. I want to be able to connect with our customers and get the word out in a way that reduces our customer acquisition cost. Our company is completely bootstrapped. We are so scrappy. I don't know that we would have that same mentality if we had raised money at the start.
You moved to New York from San Francisco 2 years ago.
When we began, we had many conversations about should this be in California or should this be in New York?
New York City is better in the consumer market space as opposed to San Francisco is better for tech.
The density of the city has been incredible for organic virality and word of mouth. So much of our strategy is about demos and pop-ups and in-person events.
What were you looking for in a co-founder?
We were a little worried at the start that we would have overlapping interests and strengths, but
What do you consider success right now for Beny Yogurt?
our current next goal post is to do our first production run.
What is up, and welcome back to The Time I Left My 9 to 5, a podcast where we explore the journeys of people who have taken the leap to pursue their passions and create a life of their own design. Kiki is the co-founder of Beny Yogurt, and I have to say, she's probably one of the coolest founders I've ever interviewed in the history of this podcast. Kiki's story is one of calculated risk-taking and determination, as she left behind a successful career in private equity to build a consumer product from scratch with no investment funding. What I love about Kiki's story is her unique approach to building a business. Kiki and her co-founder Elon chose to build their brand in public, sharing behind-the-scenes moments on social media, and has already gathered over 12,000 loyal customers before the brand has even launched. Her always-on launch strategy, combined with the fact that the company is 100% bootstrapped, has forced her and her co-founder to think very carefully about each step and every decision. With her forward-thinking mindset, bias towards action, and bravery, Kiki's commitment is driven by creating a product that truly makes a difference in people's everyday lives. Without a doubt, Kiki is an inspiration to anyone looking to make a change. I'm super excited to share this conversation with you. What ultimately made Kiki decide to leave her 9 to 5 behind, and how she has navigated the challenges and opportunities of building a business from scratch. But before we jump in, I would love if you could subscribe to the channel if you're watching this on YouTube, or rate the podcast if you're listening everywhere else. You have no idea how such a small action can help me continue bringing you more unfiltered, real conversations just like this one. Thank you so much, Kiki, for joining us today on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to chat.
Yeah, I'm actually super excited. You're like one of the coolest guests I've had so far on the podcast. And I found you on Instagram, and I'm absolutely obsessed with your content and your whole idea of building publicly. So, yeah, let's dive in. First question that I would like to ask all of my guests is
Mhm.
from a scale of 0 to 10, how much do you regret quitting your 9 to 5 at this point in time? Like 0 being the best decision of your life.
I think 0. I totally think 0. Like every day I wake up and I'm so excited to get to work on Beny, and there's different challenges that we have that I didn't have in my 9 to 5. And I think there's some emotional tolls that definitely come with it, but I wouldn't trade it. I think it's something that makes every day exciting and different and dynamic. And I feel like I'm, firing and engaged on all cylinders in a way that I wasn't prior.
Can you walk us through a little bit of your journey from Stanford University to private equity and then to
Yeah.
co-founding Beny Yogurt?
Totally. So, yes, I went to Stanford. I studied human biology. I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with that. There was a lot of people who were pre-med and who were going to medical school, and I knew that I cared a lot about the human experience and our health, but I didn't really want to be a doctor, and I didn't think that that was going to sort of satiate the part of the like ambitious drive that I knew I wanted to create and build, and sort of the latitude to be able to do that freely. And so I was looking for what was next for me, and I actually came across my company and I started talking to my now previous boss, but she hired me. I think I was her first hire actually, and really realized, okay, this is a place where I know that this person is really going to believe in me. And I know that there is a really good opportunity for me to learn a ton. I don't know if this is going to be my forever job, but I know that this is a really good first job. I never envisioned myself in private equity, but with the right company, with the right team, with the right tools, I knew it would be an incredible stepping stone to maintaining optionality for whatever I wanted to do down the line. I spent 4 years working at Alpine Investors, a private equity firm in San Francisco. So I started out during the pandemic in 2020, working from my, Zoom setup. And that was actually where Alon and I really became super close friends. We became best friends at Stanford, but we started living together in San Francisco during the pandemic. And as you know, with the way that people socialized during the pandemic, whoever you were living with or in your inner circle became incredibly enveloped in your life. We became attached at the hip. That's actually when she started making yogurt to help heal her own gut. She was having a lot of health issues and realized that it all stemmed from the microbiome. And if she really wanted to start addressing that, she could start taking probiotic pills or she could start actually putting those probiotics in the food she was eating. And so that's what she did is she decided to take yogurt and actually start culturing the right probiotics for her health. And so, was working there for the past few years and I actually moved to New York about 2 years ago now. And we had a point earlier last year where I realized I've learned a lot from this firm. There's so much that it's given me and I've given it. I'm like, there is a cap right now on what I want to learn and what's next for my growth. I think it's time for a different adventure. How do I use these skills that I've learned and actually apply them in a new way to something that I care deeply about and that I'm very proud of? That's when I started looking for what was next. And it became super clear that the yogurt that Alon had been making in our little apartment in San Francisco was the right thing to tackle this challenge, was just the optimal opportunity to work together to build something we really, really deeply care about. We had conviction and still have a ton of conviction that there's a white space in the market and that this is needed. Because if it was on the shelves, we would buy it. We wouldn't need to make it. And also, I think a career is really the set of challenges you decide to put in front of you. For us, this felt like the right set of challenges that we really wanted to go at together. We ended up quitting our jobs in December, and now it's been 3 months of us working full time on this.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. It almost feels like a full circle from your human biology background to
Yeah,
building a yogurt company. Actually, can you explain what is human biology? Because I did my
totally.
undergrad was in human geography. It wasn't about physical landscape, but it was more about the movement of people and goods that I
Yeah.
find really interesting. So is it similar in a way that you add people to biology?
Yes, similar in a way. And I would say that the core education of it is let's study what's happening on a very biological level of the human experience. So we've studied cellular biology. We studied anatomy, physiology. We studied the evolution of humans throughout history, like how we actually got to, Homo sapien, and went really in depth on that, learning all about what's going on in your cells. But at the same time, we also learned about developmental psychology. So you're learning about how your cells are regenerating and what's happening everywhere in your body and the different types of cells. You're also learning about how your psychology develops and theories around human development. We also learned about healthcare economics. And so, as you're learning about physiology and different illnesses and what that actually looks like in chronic illnesses, you're learning about the healthcare system and how healthcare economics actually like ties into that. It's the social science and the hard science related to the human experience at the same time. Yep.
Love that. So usually I like to dive into the emotional side of leaving your 9 to 5, but I'm actually just so excited about your company. Let's
Yeah.
talk about your Beny yogurt. As a first time entrepreneur, what has been the biggest surprise or challenge in building a business so far from scratch?
I think that the biggest surprise and positive surprise has been how welcoming and how excited everybody in the CPG community who are already founders, and CPG is consumer packaged goods. So people who are in this space already are so welcoming and willing to dive in and help you. That has been the most incredible part of this journey, to feel like there's actually a community that we've landed in. Like, this is not a solo venture that we are doing. We have found new people and a new network in a matter of a few months and felt like we can really lean on those people. And so that's been like the most incredible thing. And then I think the sub bullet to that is use your network. Like that's been the biggest thing that I've learned also about building is I just got off the phone with someone that I worked with at my private equity firm. She was an operator in one of the portfolio companies, and she runs this big charity event, and they want to showcase female founders who are, in the food space. And so we're going to be at that charity event, and that unlocks a whole new set of customers for us that I wouldn't have had access to. And so really being clear with your network, what you're doing and how they can help, and then utilizing that has saved us so many hours. We've learned so much from people who've already been in the industry. And then it's also opened new doors and opportunities for us in a way that we wouldn't have imagined.
You have this very interesting approach about building publicly. So, would you say to keep that connection flowing, were you sort of reaching out to people and kind of updating them as you go? Or do you think people mostly find you now based on your social media accounts?
I would say it's mostly based on my social media, and I think that there's a reason for that. I don't want to have to constantly update people in my life, and there's not a set Rolodex list of all my contacts that I'm gonna update. And so the beauty of our social platforms is I can create one piece of content and it can be repurposed 5 ways. And so I can create a Instagram video, and I think of that almost as what's the more relatable, authentic version of LinkedIn? To me, that's my Instagram. I can answer direct questions about how to build a business. I can answer how I'm feeling about something, big decision we're making. And I wouldn't quite say that on LinkedIn. It's not fully my personal life, right? It's like Kiki as co founder of Beny. It's not Kiki as full Kiki. But I can take that piece of content about how I'm feeling about a big decision and repurpose it into just why I'm making that big decision and put it on LinkedIn. And so that audience on LinkedIn sees that side of things. And that's where I've really seen a lot of people in my existing network pour out and help me is because I've been sharing my journey on all these platforms, they've been caught up in some way or another. And then they know exactly what's going on in my life as it pertains to Benny and how they could plug in and help. And so being top of mind is a really important part of actually utilizing many of these connections.
When did you first get the idea of building in public? It's both a very exciting but also scary thing because when you succeed in public, but when you fail, you also fail in public. And how do
Totally.
you deal with those kind of emotions going through your head?
It's a day-to-day battle. Yeah, I knew we needed to build in public because of the product that we are putting out in the market. It is a consumer product, and so ultimately, I want to be able to connect with our customers and get the word out in a way that reduces our customer acquisition cost. So, another way to do this is I could pay Meta a bunch of money and run a bunch of ads in different places and try and get the word out in that way. And you know what? Down the line, we probably will do that. But for right now, when we have very little budget, the easiest way to get an audience is to do it yourself. Not the easiest, let me say that again. The cheapest way to get an audience is to do it yourself. And so I knew that to be true, in addition to the fact that we have a product that expires. I can't just make a bunch of product and hope to sell it in the next 2 years. I have to sell it in a month. That's a very short shelf life. We need to have a virtual line out the door at any given moment. And the way to create and generate that demand and the easiest, again, I use the word easiest, but it's sort of the cheapest and most accessible way I know how to do that is through social media. And so that was the decision was I'm a competitive person. I'm an ambitious person, and I know that this is really necessary for my company to succeed. Does that mean I have to take it on the face and take it on the nose like every single day and skewer myself a little bit? And I mean that like not as intense as I say it, but I think there is a kernel of truth in that. It's a very intense trade-off that I had to think about a lot, and I think it's constantly evolving. If you asked me 3 months ago, "What is your social media presence and identity, and how does that look?" It was a lot broader. Now I'm narrowing in on what actually can keep Kiki sane, and what keeps Kiki sane is using this as almost a content creation specifically for the journey of building Benny. It's not about who Kiki is generally. It's about what this specific experience looks like and what I can teach people about this experience. Versus I think 3 months ago, it was like Kiki more broadly and like everything about life and just a little bit more personal and mixed. That is when it gets really hard because you personally are on the line in terms of your success rather than the company is on the line for the success or failure.
I love that. That is so smart. And people come along the journey with you in a sense they're invested in your building this yogurt brand and
Yeah.
you're building a loyal customer base while sharing them. And I love how you corrected yourself from being the easiest way to the cheapest way,
Yeah.
because as a content creator myself, I know firsthand how much work it is behind each of these videos. I've also had acquaintances of friends who are in the space of startup founding businesses where the board is making them choose between having a social media presence versus building out the company full time because it takes a lot of your focus and time away from building the company, I'd say. So how do you balance like how much time do you actually put in content creation? I know this is part of marketing, maybe it's part of your role anyways, versus figuring out the launching strategy, figure out product development and manufacturing process.
Yeah. I'm really, really happy that Alon is my partner in this because there's so many things I can lean on her for that I would not be able to do given I'm spending time on social media and having to cultivate that. And so I think that's the give and take is if I was a solo founder, this would be a really different story. And maybe my best use of my time would still be social media at this stage, right? But maybe not. For what it's worth, I started creating content. I was a normal person, meaning I was not creating content. I was maybe posting twice a year on my social media. And I started creating content in the fall before I left my job. And that was an incredibly good decision in hindsight because it really made me exercise the muscle of creating content before I was fully founding a business. And I was able to get used to editing videos, making content. And it used to take me at the start 4 hours to make a video. And now I know how to do it. I know what works for me. And it can take me 30 minutes to an hour to post a video. If I think about my whole day and where that fits in, that's nothing ultimately, right? That's just one part of my day. And what it takes is it means I have to be a little bit more diligent about my planning, how I think about the content, making sure that it's planned out for the week. So I'm not just haphazardly throwing things together and trying to create a story of it. But if I'm actually intentional, I'm able to time box it in a way that really makes sense. And you really just have to start thinking about it as a channel. This is a marketing channel. This is a top of funnel channel. And I'm just setting aside time every single week to do this. But otherwise, no, I'm like working on packaging. We're talking to the co manufacturers. We're trying to get our women owned certification, organic certification. Like all of those types of things have to fit into the puzzle or else I will have no business. And this doesn't matter. So, yes, it's both of those things. Yeah.
Looking back, what were you looking for in a co-founder? Did you know that
Mm.
Elon was the best person to be in this business with? Did you guys have similar strength or complementing strength?
It's a great question. I think that we always knew that we would work really well together. We never had our sights set on, we're definitely going to build a company together one day. But she is a friend that I can chew through problems with, think through challenges, talk about life with in the hard and good parts, and feel very confident about, you know, the way she processes things and the conclusions we'll come to together. I had no doubt would be incredible co founders together. I think we were a little worried at the start that we would have overlapping interests and overlapping strengths. But the further we've gone into this, the more we've seen actually we have really complementary strengths. And the best part is that we deeply respect how each other thinks and how each other operates. And we know and we trust that the other person is going to get the thing done. So we don't need to worry about that. But she's an engineer. She was a computer science major at Stanford and she loves the details, loves it. She is reading yogurt textbooks. She is understanding the machinery. She is figuring out exactly the recipe, how we engineer the nutrition label and all those things that I don't want to deal with. It doesn't excite me. And I'm not good at that in the same way. And on the reverse, I have 1,000 conversations a day I'm reaching out, figuring out partnerships, understanding our go to market strategy, how we're going to utilize distribution, how we utilize social media, how we get out there, how we spread the word, how are we everything everywhere all at once in this city and beyond. And that brings me a ton of energy. And so I think there's actually a really incredible partnership that we have. It was intentional, but also we stumbled into a little bit of understanding what each other's strengths are.
One of your punchlines on social media is I'm quitting my job in private equity to
Mhm.
build Beny yogurt with my best friend. Just focus on the best friend part. How has your relationship like
Yeah.
changed, or how have you been trying to maintain that friendship while building a business? New people would say, don't go into business together with your best friends, but clearly you guys are defying that, traditional stereotype.
Yeah. It's been really amazing for our friendship. I think it's given us something to create together, which has been so satisfying for both of us. And it's almost like a playground for us to explore our friendship even further. So if I think about it solely from the friendship perspective, and I don't even care about the success of Benny, what an incredible opportunity to get to make decisions together, to get to push each other, to get to learn each other's edges on a specific topic on this thing that happens to be yogurt. And that's a whole new side of each other that we would never experience if it wasn't for creating a company together. It almost feels like you're having a child with your best friend, right? And I think that has been so rewarding and so fun to get to see Alon in a new light. And like tonight, I'm going over to her and her girlfriend's place and we're having dinner and like I'm just going to hang out with them. And that's, we spend so much time together. And I think it's strengthened our relationship because there's another thing for us to connect over, which has been surprising in some ways. We were nervous that it wouldn't result in this. We were nervous that it would make it feel strictly business only, right? And we're only building this thing together. And then there's not much room or oxygen for our friendship. But it's actually all intertwined and it's actually strengthened our friendship in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I definitely think that comes through as well in your social media because I know sometimes
Mm,
you guys do those talking heads together and it
yeah.
really shows your incredible friendship that's growing through this partnership as well.
Yeah.
So you moved to New York from San Francisco 2 years ago.
Hmm.
Did you guys move together as a choice? Because I know in one of the videos you said that New York City is better in the consumer market space as opposed
Hmm.
to, San Francisco is better for tech. Was that an intentional choice for Benny Yogurt in a way?
Everything hindsight 2020. No, it was not an intentional choice. We moved here on our own. So I am from the Bay Area in California. I went to Stanford. I lived in San Francisco, and it was just time for me to grow in a new way and to experience a new city and something different. And for that, that led me to New York. And my job at the time had an office in New York City. And so it made the transition incredibly easy and smooth for me to be there. So I made that decision without ever knowing that I was going to start a yogurt company down the line. I made it for myself and for my own growth. She is from New York. Alana's from New York. And so when I moved, it was an opportunity to also look around and say, do I want to continue spending time here in San Francisco or should I try a new chapter? And for her, it was time to try a new chapter. And so she also moved. So it was sort of an independent decision, but of course, we are very similar and we talked a lot about it. But it was totally independent from starting the yogurt company. When we began the yogurt company together, we had many conversations about should this be in California or should this be in New York? And we ultimately landed on staying here for all the reasons that I listed, which is just the density of this city has been incredible for organic virality and word of mouth about Benny. So much of our strategy is about demos and pop ups and in person events and plugging into everything that the New York community offers. And the amount of events and density of all of those sort of activities are so much higher here than in California, just given like the space. There's constraints on the space here, and there's so many people in this space. And so, because of that, everyone lives outside their apartments and in community with one another. And so, it's a lot easier to reach people in that way spontaneously than I have found in other places.
Yeah. New York is expensive, but so is San Francisco. When you guys took the leap of faith, did you have a safety net or plan B when you decided to quit? Was your company completely bootstrapped?
Yes, our company is completely bootstrapped. That is something we had to talk a lot about prior to actually jumping ship was we have to be okay with never taking a dollar for the next at least 2 years. Can we pay our rent? Can we pay food for ourselves? Can we invest a little in this business? And we are lucky that we worked good jobs for the past 4 years, have been saving money, and are in a position where we can say, yes, we can take that on the nose right now. And if 2 years from now we can no longer do that, we need to think about raising money or think about doing something else. Right. And like that's a very real thing. What I will say is it makes our decision making matrix very different right now. I think if we'd raised 1 million at the start and, had that money to play with, I don't think every decision would be as careful or thought out. And I don't know that we would be as scrappy. Like we are so scrappy. It's incredible. Sometimes I'm like, oh my God, we're out here clawing our way into everything that we can for free in the easiest ways possible and trying to be everywhere and just like, breaking all the right and appropriate rules in these types of ways. And I don't know that we would have that same mentality if we had raised money at the start.
I'm very curious about your decision behind not raising money from the
Yeah.
start.
Yeah.
What factors came into play?
Yeah. So I think CPG is a very different world than, like a venture model. And I think there's a venture model that often is sort of copy pasted on top of these CPG brands. And hey, there's some that have really crazy and good outcomes. And we are not going to be selling at like a crazy multiple on our revenue down the line. Like most CPG brands are not doing that. And so the the growth is there, but it's definitely slower and it's not as high valued. That's something I thought a lot about is what does that actually mean for our ownership and our dilution in terms of ownership of the company, right? If we raise money, we own far less of this company. Yes, maybe it gives us the tools to play with, but I don't actually know that we need that money right now. And then for what? We get diluted and now we're under the clock and now we have to build with these different expectations rather of having full ability to dictate how and where and when and what pace we build this company. I think that was a huge, huge component of this is like, what's the model of growth that we really want to go for? And then the second part is what are the KPIs? Like, what are the key performance indicators and what are the metrics that we want to hit? And do we need money for that? When we really thought about it, the next sort of metrics that we want to hit in our business, we need some money. We need some upfront money, which is why we have put in some of our own money. But otherwise, we don't need 1.5 million. We need tens of thousands, but we don't need so much more, right? And then we'll see, hey, is that product actually what we want it to be? Is that viable in that way? And if we get the metrics for that, and then we see that the next set of metrics, we actually need a lot more money because that means going national or doing whatever, then we'll reevaluate. Maybe we should raise money. But it's all about what's the next goalpost and how do you get there. And if you need capital, you need capital. If you don't, you don't. And I think there's often a confusion or people misplace success on raising capital versus actually creating a good business. And so you'll hear people say, are they Series A? How much do they raise in their Series A? Like, or their Series B, like how much do they raise? And that's a mark of success rather than the business itself being a mark of success and how that's been built. So that was like a lot of word salad, but I think that's how we've thought about that in general in terms of raising money.
What do you consider success right now for, let's say, this end of this year for Benny Yogurt? What's your metrics?
I mean, our current next goalpost is to do our first production run and to be able to, sell that without a lot of chargebacks, which means selling all the product and hitting good velocities in grocery stores. So that's really our thing is how do we produce 1,000 units of yogurt every 2 weeks and see that totally sell out and continue that trajectory. And if we get the unit economics right, like we can be, bringing that can be funding itself to some extent, right? And so that's the
Mhm.
biggest thing in the next few months that we're really, really, really focused on.
Love that. Thank you for sharing. I'd love to switch gear right now and talk about when you left your 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Based on everything you've talked about so far, it sounds like it was a very calculated decision. You guys knew what you're going to do when you both left your job. Did you experience any identity shift, like from Stanford to private equity, which is so much prestige? to entrepreneurship, which,
Mhm.
may or may not make it.
Yeah.
Did you experience the identity shift? How did you navigate that?
Yes, I totally did. And I think it actually happened far more when I was still working in private equity than after I quit. I think there was this feeling of, oh my gosh, like I am totally going off track. I am taking a full veer to the left. And I have no idea if this is going to be successful or not. And I've been on this track, like you said, my whole life. I was a nerdy, dorky little kid who wore glasses since the age of 3, and I still have really bad eyesight. I'm just wearing contacts, and was always straight A student and got into Stanford. And then what was next? I'm going to work in private equity. And then what's next? Is that actually what's making me happy? Is that actually what I want with my life? And sitting and grappling with what is it that I want from this life and how do I actually design that really well, I think was the biggest thing that I had to come to terms with. And being able to separate Kiki from the institutions she's part of. Kiki has always pinned herself to, being a Californian, to being a straight A student, to going to Stanford, to working in private equity. And these things created a halo of like, oh yeah, she's doing the right thing and she's successful. So having to separate myself from any institution and just be okay with Kiki as Kiki and it standing for whatever I stand for on my own, I think was the biggest and hardest thing for me to grapple with. Once I got there, and I think that happened while I was sort of in this process of separating from my job, and I told everybody, and I had my 6 months notice and all of those things, which is insane. I did that.
6 month notice.
I
Wow.
know, I know. Then I was really free from that, and I think there was such a freedom that came from being able to say, "I'm choosing this," and even if it fails, it's the life and the experience that I want to design for myself, and I'm actively choosing it, and it's the thing that I wanna live every single day, and so once I got really, really crystal clear and felt okay about it, the rest of the transition was a lot easier.
Yeah. And I love that mindset. Like, even if you fail, you've learned so much along the way. Like, you can always go back to private equity. You can always use your Stanford degree. And
Totally.
now you have social media skills and skills building relationships with suppliers. And those are all
Yeah.
super valuable.
Yeah,
Now you're
yeah.
much more well rounded, multifaceted person. Um,
That's the hope.
okay. So, were your parents okay with the shift? What was their role in supporting you in this transition?
Well, actually, my dad grew up on a dairy farm, so that's like a fun and full circle other moment here is he never thought that his daughter would go back to dairy, and here I am, back in dairy. I didn't grow up on the dairy farm, but I grew up going there a lot. It's where my grandparents lived until the day they died, and my uncle still runs the dairy farm, and my cousins do too, and so it's very much a part of our family. They are wholly supportive right now, and fully once I was on board, they were on board, but they are some of my biggest advisors. And so every moment of when I was sort of going through this questioning of how do I want to design my life and what are the things that I really care about and is this the thing that I really want to pour myself into? They continued to staunchly push back on me, if only just to have me clarify what I want to do. They are fully supportive. And I think their way of getting there and their way of really helping me was actually to challenge me through it. So some of my toughest conversations were with them when I was thinking about whether I should do this or not. And, you know, them saying, is it just about creating a brand and marketing? Or do you actually know that you're going to have to work with hourly workers and you're going to have to be on the plant floor? There is going to be stuff that comes up that you have never even imagined because ultimately this is an operational business and it's logistics and it's on the ground. And are you sure that that's what you want to do? Or is it that you just want to create this fun brand? What is it that you actually want to build? And through those conversations, it helped me get clear of, yeah, that's so true. And I've actually thought about that and I want all of it. The reason I'm doing this is because I don't want to just be siloed to the marketing thing. No, I want to be able to have my hands in all of these buckets and actually be able to create and build something and have that experience of doing that and be able to create an impact at the end in people's lives in their day-to-day lives because yogurt is something they eat every single day. So they're on board, and have been, like, the most helpful in it too.
Wow.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love the way that they approached it and the way they responded. Because when parents challenge you in a way, like I feel like it could have gone sideways depending on the relationship and the recipient, where it's like, oh,
Totally.
do you actually support me? Do you not want me to do this? Or are you really pushing me to take the next step? So I love how much you've thought about your interaction with your parents and how they have played a role in this. Would you say the biggest difference between, working private equity, actually working private equity is probably a lot of hours. It's not a typical 9 to 5. Um,
It's
what's the,
different
okay,
though. It's
it's
different.
different. What's the biggest difference with working in private equity and doing your own yoga brand?
It's so different. It is always on. Like, even having long hours is really different than being a founder. Actually, my boyfriend is a founder, and we just spent a weekend away this weekend. It was the first time that I really felt the absence of Benny because I made a concerted effort not to post and not to be on my phone. And you realize how much space it takes up in your brain once you step away from it. And I think that's the biggest difference. Even if my hours aren't, as bad, so to speak, or like I have more flexibility, right? I had my first meeting today at 10:30, and before that I could work out and I did a little, website review on Figma. I was just like bumbling around, but it's always on my mind. And so I think the mental space it holds in your brain is so much more than it was ever working in private equity, even though my hours maybe sitting down at a computer were longer. It was time boxed. It's like I can put away Outlook, I can put away Slack, I cannot think about it. Now it's everything that I do. I walk around the street and I don't know if someone will recognize me for Beny yogurt. I carry stickers just in case I happen to run into somewhere and I have people I want to give it to. And I'm just always on and having to think about it and having to sell and pitch to people. And so I think that's the biggest difference. And it can be really exhausting. It can turn into your whole identity. And I think that's the thing that I grapple with is you know, Beny yogurt is something I'm pouring myself into, but ultimately it lives outside of Kiki. And so that distinction is something that's we're figuring out.
What is one advice you would give for someone who are still working their 9 to 5, but are potentially thinking about taking that big leap? Like,
Mm,
what advice would you give them?
I would say that one piece of advice or multiple pieces of
Okay, you
advice.
can do multiple pieces of advice.
I think that you need to make a vi- I think you need to think really clearly your financial picture. So I think that's number one is it's not all romantic. There are some literal nuts and bolts that you need to be able to live your life and give yourself optionality and give yourself the runway to start a business. And so if that means raising money, great. If that means using some of your savings and putting that off to the side, if that means taking a little side job and you're working an hourly job on the side and it's not your whole business, you don't have to pour your life into it, but it's just covering your rent. Let's get really clear about that and make sure that you are set up in a place where if one day you want to leave your 9 to 5, you can actually do that. I think that's the biggest thing is having a clear picture of your financial situation. I would say number 2 is for me, it was really important that we had some product market fit before we even left our jobs. We did a million customer interviews just to get really clear on what the white space was and understand who the market is and who our customers are. And then we started selling product before we actually quit our jobs, just to ensure like there are strangers that would buy this and they would continue buying this. And even though it's only this group of 50 people, at least it's 50 and not 0. We knew that there would be people who would want to put, money where their mouth was and not just watch me on social media, right? I think there's a huge
Mm,
difference there. And then my final piece of advice is like done is better than perfect. It's really hard in your 9 to 5 to work another job. It is just so exhausting. I mean, I did that and I wasn't giving my full self to either place, to Benny or to my private equity job. And it can feel really grating and like you're being torn apart in two different ways. Like I was always checking both emails and feeling totally of a split mind. And so give yourself some grace in that and just know that like you doing whatever it is for your company on the side is moving the ball forward in a way and you can't expect it to be perfect because you're just like it's the first time you're doing it. And so to put something on a page or to put something in social media or to put a product out there is far better than not having done it, even if it's not perfect.
Thank you
Mhm.
for sharing that, and thank you for taking the time. And for those of you out there who wants to follow Kiki's journey, you can find them on social media, Beny Yogurt or Kiki's Instagram at Couchwoman. I'm actually curious. I know your last name is Couchman. How did you come up with this Instagram handle?
Yes, it's exactly that. So my last name is Couchman. It has been Couchwoman since my freshman year of high school. When I first opened up Instagram, I knew it would be funny just to do Couchwoman, and now it's just stuck, and I feel deeply attached to Couchwoman as a name.
Love that. Follow
Yeah.
Couchwoman on Instagram, and I'll link all of the social media links in the description box below as well. Thank you so much, Kiki, for taking the time today.
Thank you.